Hello, I'm Monsignor Jim Lisante. Today, on Personally Speaking, I'll be joined by Madison Cawthorn. Madison is a 24-year-old real estate investor from Western North Carolina who recently defeated the candidate endorsed by President Trump in a Republican runoff for White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' seat in Congress. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and Madison Cawthorn joins me now. Madison is a real estate investor who recently, in a surprise win, beat his Republican opponent, Linda Bennett, in the primary race for the U.S. House seat vacated by Mark Meadows, who stepped down from Congress to become President Trump's chief of staff. President Trump had backed Linda Bennett, but while Madison didn't have his endorsement, he ran on a pro-Trump platform. Madison Cawthorn is running to represent North Carolina's 11th congressional district, a Republican-leaning district in Western North Carolina. He turns 25 in August of this year, the required minimum age to become a member of Congress. If elected, Madison Cawthorn would become the youngest member of the House. Madison's personal story has been part of his campaign message. In 2014, he was nearly killed in a car crash and left partially paralyzed and living life in a wheelchair. He's here with us today to tell us what gave him a renewed sense of purpose and why he feels he's ready to bring a new generation of leadership to Washington, D.C. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, congressional candidate Madison Cawthorn. Madison, we had recently on Congressman Dan Lipinski of Chicago. He's a Democrat, but he's also pro-life. He had a primary he was facing, and they were going after him because he was pro-life. And he lost that primary, so he lost his nomination. I mentioned that because I said to him, is it possible to be true to your values in Congress and still be electable? He said, well, in my party right now, it's tough, especially if you're pro-life. What are you going to do to stay true to the things you believe when you're told in Washington, you know what, you just got to compromise?
Well, I will tell you one thing. One, I am from a very, very incredible community in Western North Carolina, up in the mountains, a lot of good country mountain values. I share the same values as my constituents for overwhelmingly. And so the great part about that is that I don't have to worry about losing my base if I stick true to my values. It's turned out that, especially in the recent past with the former Congressman Meadows, my constituency in Western North Carolina responds incredibly well to when you take those hard stands, when you shrug off the leadership or when you shrug off the establishment. Because I really believe that, the establishment, it creates a less effective Congress than what we truly need to have. We're called to be there to be representatives for our constituents. But rather, so many people are going up there, they get caught up in the power games, they get caught up in the day-to-day life of Washington, D.C., and it's not profitable for their constituents.
I hope that can be true for you, because it would be wonderful if a guy like you can be true to those values that your people reflect. This is going to be a change of topics, but I think you'll find it interesting. Every weekend I get to do weddings. And when I do, to make a better homily, I say to the couples, okay, write me an essay. Why, of all the people in the world you could marry, why is this the one in a billion that you can build a life with for 50 or 60 years? You're not only about to become a congressman at 24, 25, but you are also engaged to Christina. Why is Christina the one?
Oh, well, I am so glad you asked this. This is a very fun question. You know what? So Christina, I will tell you, she's not my type. I had a type of what I looked for in girls and what I thought I wanted to marry, but then I met Christina, and it's kind of like when I think people got a smartphone for the first time. You didn't realize how much you needed it. But Christina is just incredible. She's one of the fittest women on the planet. She is a CrossFit superstar, so she's incredibly strong, incredibly athletic. Wow. But in addition to that, she actually just took her boards for anesthesia. She graduates in August with a master's in anesthesia, and she is currently actually performing C-sections right at this very moment in Atlanta, Georgia, at a hospital there. So she's doing incredible. But I will tell you more so than that. One, she's a Christian, so her and I share the same values because obviously with the Bible verse, spare the rod, spoil the child. I have a way that I want to discipline my children. I have a way that I want to raise my children. So I feel like if you marry someone and you're unequally yoked and you don't share that same value system, it'll become difficult, especially when you have children. And so I'm glad that her and I share the same values. But you know what? I have found that her and I just have fun. That is the thing that I love the most about her. Her and I we could be stuck in a room together and we could create the best memories. Her and I are we really get along. She's my best friend. I'll tell you that.
Isn't that great? Now, if I had Christina here and I said, why Madison? What would she say?
Oh, she'd probably say she was bamboozled and she's trying to get out of the whole thing. No, she's great. She's great. I'll have to have her back on and she'll give you the answer sometime.
Good.
Do a double interview.
I like that idea. Let's go to something kind of going to the parental role you were just talking about. Your parents, in raising you, Madison, what did they do right?
You know what? I always say that I was raised on Proverbs and push-ups. Okay. They believed in trying to impart as much wisdom as possible, especially when it came from, Judeo-Christian values. I was forced to read the Proverbs every single morning, one chapter every day. And so it was an incredible way to start your day because, the Proverbs is just such a simple book in the Bible. It's just, hey, do this, don't do that. Right. It's very, very simple. It's easy for a child to understand. And it helped for my public speaking abilities because I would have to get behind a podium at 6 years old, and I'd read a proverb every single morning. And I did that all the way through until I was 18, actually. So it was it was an incredible way to be raised. But also, when I say Proverbs and push-ups, there was a significant amount of discipline. My parents didn't have a lot of rules, but they had very high expectations. And if we didn't meet those, there were consequences, whether that was, being grounded being forced to literally do push-ups. I remember sometimes my dad would say, okay, well, we're going to do push-ups until I get tired. And then he'd sit in a chair and I would just keep going until my arms gave out. And it was a great way to be raised. But, most importantly, my parents imparted love on me. They cared about me. They supported me in anything I wanted to do. I would say that my mother taught me compassion, taught me my people skills. She was like the gunpowder, but my father was the barrel. He really shaped me. He made sure that I was going in the right direction. That I veered off the path too far. He was just like that bore in the barrel, forcing you in the correct direction. And then I just was able to be projected forward thanks to them. I attribute much of who I am to my parents.
We're talking here with Madison Cawthorn. He is a congressional candidate from North Carolina, soon, I hope, to be a congressman from North Carolina. Let's go to something that people listening around the country would know about you. That is the accident that you had in your late teens. When I'm dealing, Madison, with people who have no faith, and they go through tough times, they very often express anger at God. I never believed anyway, and now I really don't believe. But for people of faith, it's tougher in that we do believe, and because we believe, we want to believe that because we're good guys, God is noticing our good guyness and is going to watch over us. When you went through that experience of the accident, did you go through any period of shaking your fist in God's face like, hey, why me?
You know what? I will say, thankfully, I had a very real relationship with the Lord, and it formed over years and years, just, constantly walking with him. Jesus is my friend. He's my brother, and then, God the Father. But I will say, so I never lost my faith, never was rebellious to the Lord. But I will say, I remember one time I was just struggling with my emotions because I felt hurt. I felt betrayed. I remember I had fasted 2 weeks before that accident happened, just asking for God's will in my life. And then, I just remember being in the hospital saying, wow, God, this is the will you had for me in my life. And I remember when I was really having a hard time being able to express my feelings. So I didn't want to speak in a bad way about my God to anyone. And I also I wanted to be respectful towards him when I was in prayer. And so I was in a tough time. But I'll tell you what changed all of that. My older brother is one of the wisest men I know. He was by my bedside, and he said, so have you been talking to God recently? I said, yeah, but I'm really struggling on what to say. And he said, and he put his hand on me and he said, well, Madison, just remember that God can take it, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Wow. And then he got up and left the room, and I felt a lot like David. You read through Samuel, you see David, how he's just really just sometimes crying out to the Lord, like why so downcast, oh my soul, in the Psalms. And I was the same, and God can take it. I really, there were times I was in the throne room in prayer, just yelling, just being, God, why is this happening to me? But you know what? He showed me incredible grace, incredible mercy. And he gave me a peace that transcended all understanding. And, I asked tough questions. I said, God, are you here? Is this what you have for my life? And he answered me. And so to anyone listening, I encourage you, if you are struggling with your faith, or if you actually believe in God, challenge you, just say, God, show yourself to me.
Mm-hmm.
Make yourself known. Please allow me. And, that's not testing your God as you're not supposed to do, but I believe that's very fair and within our faith. And I think God will always answer those calls if they're honest.
That's beautiful, Madison. Thank you for that. And, Madison Cawthorn, for those listening, is kind of an unusual guy in that, and I feel this way about the church, not just about politics. You've said about Republican Party, we got to stop saying what we're against and express what we're for. And sometimes I feel with my own church that we are very clear about all the things we're against, but what are we for? Two issues that you've talked about, immigration and healthcare. What can we do to show as conservatives, as Republicans, what we're positively for? How can we change the game for the good?
Well, you know what? I think the Republicans have struggled so much with messaging over the past few decades, especially when it comes to immigration. The way that they have presented it, it makes us seem as if we're xenophobic and we hate people that don't look like us. But that's not the case at all. The reason we want a secure border is just because we want to make sure our national security is taken care of. And more so, we also just want to know who's coming into our country. I love legal immigration.
Mm-hmm.
My fiance is a second generation immigrant. Her father came here from Haiti. An incredible family, incredible life story with my fiance's family. But I will tell you that without immigration, our country would be worse off.
Right.
I genuinely believe that bringing in people, especially skilled people in a merit-based immigration process, we can make our country better. It gives us more diversity of thought. Mm-hmm. And also it can bring in some of the most incredible people. The fastest growing demographic for wealth in our country, for wealth creation, is Asian Americans. They come here, they work hard. Oftentimes I feel like many of the first generation immigrants who come to our country work much harder than Americans who have been here, for people like me, for 8 generations.
Right.
And so I think that we need to be more forward thinking when it comes to immigration, who we bring into our country, and really just show that we love immigrants. We just want to make sure that we know who you are.
Madison Cawthorn is our guest. Madison, you've shared with us that the experience of the accident moved you from sympathy, which is a good thing, but even more deeply into something called empathy, where you actually walk in the shoes of someone else who's suffering. In the same way, you are, as you mentioned, an 8th generation American. You might be, Madison, the whitest guy I've ever had on my show. So I have to ask you, I got to ask you, how do you develop empathy for the struggle of African Americans?
Well, you know what? I believe the big thing that changed my life is, after my accident, my very first outing, I went to a professional baseball game. Well, with my whole family. And, before my accident, when I was 18 years old, I was 6'3", 225 pounds. I was planning on going to play college football in a couple months. I was an imposing figure. And anytime I walked through a crowd, people would always notice me. People would just step out of my way. They would look at me. It was an instant level of respect just based on my physicality. But then for the very first time I'm in a crowd, for the first time since my accident, I lost 85 pounds in 3 weeks. I'm just flesh and sinew at this point. My face looks like a skull, and I'm in a wheelchair. I got a leg bag on, connected to a catheter in me. I'm the definition of weakness at that moment. And I will tell you, I noticed people looked at me different. Mm-hmm. Everyone looked at me different. People looked at me with pity. Some people looked at me with, why are you here? Some people just overlooked me completely and just didn't even notice me. And you know what? I know that I was not born with a physical disability. I was not born with a skin color that made people treat me differently. But I will tell you that interaction that I had, that moment, that taught me what it was like to be looked over in a crowd, to feel disenfranchised, to feel like perhaps I don't belong here. Mm-hmm. And I could roll by people and hear somebody whisper, "Look at Wheels over there," or something. And I feel like that's the same for an African American man. The slight little a man maybe saying boy or whatever they have to face in their day to day life. it's given me an ability to be able to empathize with them, to say, hey, I although I was not born with this, I do in a way know what you're going through, and I can empathize with that, and it enables me to, especially if I see someone who is treating a different race in a poor way, in a racist way, I can speak to them very quickly because, they respect me because, as you said, I'm the whitest guy you've ever had on your show. They respect me, and I can say, hey, I've been in his position. I'm in a wheelchair. I know what it's like for people to look at me differently. Do you know what you just did? And then I can explain to them in a way that either is going to make them feel really, really bad about themselves.
Right.
Or second, they're just going to get angry, and I'm going to realize that I need to cut them out of my life.
Right. I like that. For those who don't know, Madison Cawthorn, when he overwhelmingly won his Republican primary and became the nominee of the party, he was also, interestingly enough, not endorsed by President Trump. His opponent was, but Madison has gone out of his way to say, hey, I have no problem with the president. I'm supportive of his agenda. Madison, that especially in New York, where I'm from, people either love him or they can't stand him. Tell me something good about Donald Trump from your perspective.
You know what? My entire philosophy, when it comes to government, I believe they are there to build the framework for society to thrive. Mm-hmm. And, that means that we need to be safe. Our borders need to be protected. We need to have a qualitative military edge with our military. But we also need to be able to have infrastructure and a very fair police force that enforces the law equally and fairly across the board. I believe that the greatest thing our federal government can do is, one, make sure that we're safe, and mm-hmm. two, make sure we have a roaring economy with prosperous trade deals and good tax systems. And I believe that is what Donald Trump thrives on. Perhaps he might sometimes blunder when it comes to whenever he just is sending tweets off or whatever it is. But I will tell you, I have never seen a president, and I'm a great lover of history. I've never seen a better jobs and economy president. And I know that in 2019 we had the greatest economy the world has ever seen. Yeah. Now it's been destroyed because of a government mandated shutdown because of this coronavirus. Yeah. And so I'm thankful that we have President Trump at the helm, because I believe he'll be the best person suited to bring us back. And once we have a strong economy, once we have an unbeatable economy again, then we can start. Maybe we can elect someone who's better on social issues or something, or whatever have you. But I'll actually say, I believe President Trump has done more for the African American community than almost any president since Abraham Lincoln. You look at, and it's funny to say this talking about politics, but you look at Kanye West and Kim Kardashian working in conjunction with the president for this First Step Act. Yeah, right. When I heard they were getting together to do a bill, I was this is going to be nothing good. Uh-huh. But I have been so impressed with it because it's much needed criminal justice reform that we need in our country, and I'm very thankful for that.
I'll give you another example of what I think you're talking about, this unique backbone that he has. President Ronald Reagan, President George Bush the first and second, all identified as pro-life, and that's fine. But I have to tell you, as someone who's gone for years to the March for Life in January in Washington, D.C., they'd send a message, but nobody would come. This guy, Trump, decides if I'm pro-life, I'm going to go and join these 800,000 people. And I've never seen a president come out to a demonstration like that before. He's got chutzpah, we would say in New York. If he believes something, he's going to go with it, no matter what the world says. I'm sure he was advised not to go, but I appreciate that. Speaking of that issue, when you go down to Washington in January for that March for Life, so many more people are high school, college age, young adults. Why do you imagine that is, that this issue that was seemingly settled a long time ago, that young people still think that the unlimited, unrestricted right to abortion is a bad idea? Why do young people embrace life?
I will tell you, I believe it's because the Roe v. Wade ruling that happened those decades ago is archaic. It's outdated, and it doesn't reflect our science. Obviously, I've always been pro-life, but it was actually my fiance who really gave me some great ammunition to point out why she's pro-life. She was raised down in Miami, a very liberal area. So, I expected us to have some pretty large differences in our politics, but it turns out she's a very true conservative. I love it. And the reason she told me, and I said, well, why are you pro-life? You're from Miami. Most people where you're from are very, very pro-choice. And she said that it was because of her medical training. As I said, she's actually in an operating room helping perform C-sections right now. She said that when Roe v. Wade was passed, we didn't even have the ability to use an ultrasound. Yeah. And she said that when she shows a mother who's about to give birth, the ultrasound of her baby, and she sees it on the screen, she sees this baby has a heartbeat, And that the two also that through science we know that also these babies, even at just a couple weeks old, respond to pain. They try and evade any type of an abortion. And so I believe that a lot of people realize that Roe v. Wade is outdated. It's our science proves that life begins much earlier than what they're saying. I mean, we had the Born Alive bill trying to get passed here in North Carolina, where they were trying to say that if a baby survives a botched abortion, the doctor can then kill the baby on the operating table. It's disgusting. It's sad. And I believe we've got to turn this around, because this is a genocide going on in our country. And you know what? God can't stand for that. He can't honor that. And I don't want our country to be judged.
I totally agree with Madison Cawthorn. So I guess, Madison, I promise I'm going to wrap it soon, but let me ask you, someday you and Christina, God willing, will have children of your own. From watching your parents and your own life, have you guys figured out how do we pass on to these children we will love the values that matter?
You know what? I believe the best way to do it is my brother has just had his fourth daughter. So I've gotten to see some beautiful young nieces grow up. And, but I've realized, as I'm getting older, as I'm watching this, that their minds are basically a video recording, an audio recording. They are watching everything. I realized that, I one time actually said an inappropriate word in front of them. And then I got a call from my brother the next day saying, "Why did you say this to my daughter?" Like, oh, and he's like, now she's walking around repeating it. And I believe the best way we can demonstrate to our children and impart on them the values that we want for them to have is to live it out. To live out our Christian faith in front of them day to day, so they see, hey, you know what? Not only do my parents say this, but they also show compassion. They also show Jesus' love. They also are very, very giving. They are people but they're also very disciplined in their faith. Because as much as I have a great relationship with the Lord, it takes discipline to work on that relationship day in and day out, just as it does with any other relationship. And so I believe imparting that into them and explaining to them in a way they can understand it, and also being willing to let them ask them tough questions. I feel like so often we put children in kind of this Christian bubble where they're never exposed to any other ideas or any other thoughts. And then we're confused that when they go to college, they say they're starting to explore all these different options. Let them explore different options and try and navigate different faiths and navigate why they believe what they believe while they're in your home. Because then you can truly impart on them the wisdom that you've gained over the years and life experience that you have.
Madison Cawthorn has had a great blessing in that in winning his primary, suddenly the national media has taken a great interest in him, and they've been very kind and positive about you. But you know, as well as I, Madison, that when it comes to being Republican or conservative or Christian, you're not always going to get the fair shake from popular media. How do you plan on getting your message across and not allowing them to create an image of you that's not accurate?
My main plan is to utilize the new town square.
Okay.
Since this advent of social media, I believe that we have found that we can bring our message just like Martin Luther did with the Protestant revolution that happened when he went to the town square, nailed his theses to the door. There's not a physical town square very much anymore in the world or in the country. But now there is this digital town square where we can go onto Facebook, we can impart our ideas, we can share our life experiences. But I believe that allows us to circumvent the mainstream media. We don't have many Republicans who have utilized social media to its full extent yet, although the Democrats are doing a great job. I believe really the only Republican I can personally think of that's doing a good job with it is Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah.
He's reaching out to young people and also reaching out to people of all generations who are on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter in an incredibly effective way. And so I want to join those ranks. I want to be able to get my message out to people so they know what I truly believe, not just what the media portrays.
Madison Cawthorn. So I guess, Madison, years ago when I was talking to Justice Antonin Scalia, we were talking about another justice on the Supreme Court who came in as pro-life but changed along the way. And I said, what happened to him? And Justice Scalia said, Georgetown happened to him. The temptations of being accepted by the elite, the powerful people in D.C. happened to him. What's going to keep Madison Cawthorn honest and uncompromised?
Well, I feel like a lot of the problems stem from arrogance. People thinking that they are, because these congressmen spend day after day having people call them and say, "Oh, it's an honor to have some of your time. It's a great honor to see you." And the more you're told that, I think that it finally can take seed and you can become pretty arrogant. And because of that, you think that you want more power, and so you start playing this DC political game. But you know what? As you said, the mainstream media has been very kind to me for the last 3 weeks. I think I've gained over 100,000 followers on my social media. People are telling me I'm just the greatest thing since sliced bread every day. And I can see how that would make people pretty arrogant and content. But I will tell you, just like Paul, I feel as if I have a thorn that's in my side, and it's me being in a wheelchair. And, every morning I wake up, when I wake up, I think of myself just as who I am, and I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm not paralyzed. And so I'll turn to get out of bed. And then all of a sudden I realize, the lower 2/3 of my body doesn't work. And that's a very humbling experience. And there's so many minor inconveniences, major inconveniences you face being in a wheelchair that I think keeps me humble. And so although I believe that, this wheelchair is the bane of my existence and I would do anything to get out of it almost, I do believe it comes with its benefits. And one is that it keeps me humble and keeps my feet on the ground, as to say. And so I think because of that, I'll be able to reject this desire to have more power, because I won't be very arrogant.
I want to thank Madison Cawthorn for being with us and personally speaking. As a longtime Republican guy and of some conservative values, I got to tell you, this young man gives me more hope than ever about the future of values that last. Madison, great success in your electoral challenge. Go to Congress, make good things happen, and just know our prayers, our friendship, and support are with you. You are a great sign of hope for all of us, especially for our country. I'm grateful for you stepping forward to be a public servant. And when you have time, encourage Christina to come on our show so we can find out why she loves Madison Cawthorn.
Yes, I will do it. Well, brother, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Madison.
Very well. Bye.
As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can send them to me through my website, which is www.closeencountertv.com. www.closeencountertv.com. To listen to our Personally Speaking podcast with some of our most recent shows, you can go to find them on YouTube. Just search under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify. You can also listen to past episodes by going to www.ollmp.org. Again, www.ollmp.org, where you'll get not only past shows, but also be able to listen to Monsignor Jim Lisante's weekly homilies. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. I'd like to thank you all so much for being with us and hope you'll be with us again next time on Personally Speaking.